This deep web story is sick and disturbing. It is not for the faint of heart. If you are a sensitive person, you should stop reading right here. Continue at your own risk. This is a story from a supposed surgeon living in Eastern Europe. He sells something very peculiar on the deep web. His product is living sex dolls. They sell for about $40,000 plus shipping. This one is hard to get through. He explains himself in writing. He states that he is a prominent surgeon living in a poverty-stricken Eastern European country. He makes donations to the local orphanage and adopts several young girls from ages 6 or so to early teens. The orphanage is glad to be rid of the extra mouths to feed and happy to accept his donations, so they don't ask questions. He takes these girls home and begins a horrible, non-human transformation for a sick, evil purpose. He turns them into sex slaves. He describes his methods for doing this in demented detail. He starts by removing all 4 limbs of the girls in one surgery, leaving only stumps, which he then fastens a steel rod for chaining them, or as he suggests, hang them from a ceiling as a decoration. The girls are only fed from a bottle, minimum amounts to stay alive, and have to be placed on a toilet. He says they are extremely easy to care for. They have to eat from a bottle because all of their teeth are also removed. He then places a rubber insert in their mouth to maintain beauty and to assist with fellatio. The girls are then tortured physically and mentally to turn them into unquestioning, unfeeling slaves. They undergo the worst kinds of torture imaginable. He electrocutes and slices their genitals, cuts them regularly, beats them with almost anything you can think of, whips them mercilessly, squeezes their body parts with pliers, and that is just to start to describe the sadistic things he does to these poor little girls. The doctor destroys their hearing by playing extremely loud music and sounds from headphones. He then uses a laser to mostly blind the girls. He removes almost all of their senses to make them more docile. All the while, he performs any sexual act you can imagine on them to prepare them for their new owner. He tortures them for months before they're ready to be sold. This is perhaps one of the most horrifying and disturbing stories out there on the deep web. Many people have claimed that this dark web story was fake because no one ever found the doctor's site. Then, one 4chan user did find the site, and he took screenshots to prove it. All we can hope for is that this is just some sick, demented hoax. I have heard all the deep web stories and decided to check it out anyway. Now, I'm in my late 30s, so I really wasn't familiar with Tor or the Hidden Wiki or anything like that. I had to watch some YouTube instructional videos just to make it onto the deep web. It was relatively easy. Before long, I was browsing around. I thought I would need some secret software or some kind of download, but no, it was just the browser. All the regular sites are accessible, like Google, Amazon, or YouTube. It just allowed me to go to the onion sites as well. I looked around for hours. The illegal stuff for sale was easy to find. Drugs, porn, stolen stuff was plentiful and easily accessed. I did not see anybody getting killed or tortured, though. I was a little afraid that I might stumble onto something that I didn't want to see. After a while, I was totally bored and a little disappointed, to be honest. I'm not sure what I expected, but It was a huge letdown. Then I came across this site about bullying. It had a ton of videos to watch, more than you could see in just one sitting. They were horrible. Some were from the USA, others were from Europe and Russia, all over the world. One video featured 3 girls bullying another girl. The 3 bullies were typical punks, and the girl they were bullying was the sweet, innocent kind. The nice girl was in a pretty dress, and the other 3 were dressed like pigs. A 4th, whom you never saw, held the camera. They were by a brick building, and they had the nice girl up against the wall. The boss girl was getting in her face and poking her, flicking her hair, and generally taunting her. The good girl just turned her head back and forth and said nothing in return. Then the bully slapped her across the face, really hard. The nice girl didn't do anything. The bully then hit her in the head. The other girls were laughing and egging the boss on. Before long, she was punching the poor girl and beginning to draw blood from the nose and mouth. I figured that would stop them, seeing the blood and all. But no. The sight of the blood just encouraged those 3. Those 3 pigs all started in on the girl, punching and kicking her in a frenzy. She went down to the ground and covered up. One of the bullies got a choke chain, like you'd put on a dog for training, and a metal leash from her bag. She came prepared. She put the choke chain over the sweet girl's head and hung the other part onto something protruding from the wall, essentially hanging the girl. The poor girl had to stand on her tiptoes in order not to suffocate. They then continued to yell at her and beat her. I was grateful there was no sound. The boss girl took off of her belt and began to whip the poor victim. She was crying by this time. She must have hit her 20 or 30 times. Now, I have never hit a girl before, but if I were there, I'd have punched that girl right in the face. The video was almost 20 minutes long, and the majority of it was them beating this girl. I felt so bad for her, and couldn't help but to think that is somebody's daughter. I just couldn't believe how cruel those girls were. I'm not sure something like this could have ever happened 50 years ago. It makes me wonder how bad things will get in the future. One of the worst things was the comments below the video. I expected people to be pissed off, but instead, they were happy. Some made disgusting comments like, "I wish they tore off her dress," or "This is such a turn-on," and "Where is the happy ending?" Whatever that means. Mind you, this was just one of several videos. I could tell you about more of them if you want. I didn't see any death videos, but what I saw made me question my faith in humanity and future generations. If young girls can be that cruel, then probably all those other stories about killing people on videos could be true as well. I was affected by the deep web in that sense. I feel as if this world is getting worse, and giving birth to things like the deep web, where people take pleasure in others' pain, is just another sign that we are going in the wrong direction. God help us all. I know all those deep web stories, but I actually found 2 snuff films on the deep web with my friend's link. My friend at work gave me a link to put into Tor. He told me what it was because we had talked about snuff films several times. Almost every time we saw each other, we discussed the topic. I had looked around before, but never found any real ones. I found a fake snuff film once. It was a woman tied to a chair. She said in a very frantic voice, "Snuff films do not exist." Then a gun goes off. Her head goes back and blood splatters on the wall behind her. I quickly determined this was fake, because the blood on the wall was thrown upward as it splashed. It looked like someone threw it out of a bucket. The film looked kind of real, I guess. It did fool my other friend, who I showed it to for a while, until I pointed out the blood splattered on the wall looked like it was thrown from a bucket. Anyway, back to my friend at work. We had discussed this subject for a few months from the time he started the job. After all this time, he finally gives me a link. He never mentioned it before. I guess I finally earned his trust. He told me to try this link, so I did. There were 2 links on the page. The first was a young guy who looked to be drugged or something. He was being dragged across a rocky surface. They were white rocks, like the kind you'd find on a rocky road or pass. Someone was behind him filming with a camera, and a large man dressed all in camouflage was dragging the kid by his feet. His head was leaving a small trail of blood as it presumably was cut by dragging him over the rocks. This was to be the least of his worries. The big guy stopped and dropped the kid's feet. He showed a large serrated edged knife to the camera. The guy was wearing a ninja-style mask to cover his face. He bent over and slit the guy's throat. The body wiggled and writhed while the blood and ultimately his life was drained from the body. The video ended. I was hesitant, but too curious to not start the second video. It began with a film of an old guy with a beard, talking to the camera. You can't hear what he is saying because there is no audio. He looks to be nervously explaining himself. He talks and plays with his clothes and hands. He's wearing a striped button-down shirt and khakis. He's in a clearing with some trees behind him. The next scene shows the same big guy, dressed in camo, walking up to the old guy with the gray beard. This time, the big guy was holding a bat and had a red hat with sunglasses on. I thought it was stupid to be wearing camouflage with a bright red hat that stuck out like a sore thumb. Before I could finish the thought, the big guy whacked the old man in the head with the bat. The old guy went straight down to the ground in a second flat. We couldn't see what happened next fully and clearly because the big guy was partially blocking the action from the camera with his body. He pulled out a similar knife to the first video and bent down over the guy. He grabbed his helpless victim by the hair and presumably slit his throat in a similar fashion. You saw blood, but not the actual throat slit like the first video. He started working on the old guy, and then he walked out of the picture for a second. The man may have still been somewhat alive at this point because he was wiggling and flopping around. The big guy came back with a saw in his hand. He bent over him and started to saw the man's head off of his body. The camera stopped filming here, and a cut was obvious. The next thing you see is the big guy now holding the old man's head, which was completely severed from his body. He placed the head on a stump as the camera zoomed in for a close-up of the poor old guy's head. I had seen the terrorist beheading videos before, so I wasn't too disgusted. I was more angry than sick. I knew what I saw was real. The big guy looked like one hard, scary man. He terrified me, and I only saw him on the video. The next time I saw my friend, he asked me how I liked the movies. His remark was so casual it sounded like he was asking if I liked the new episode of some popular TV show. I commented it was gross. Then I asked him where he got them. He smiled and winked. Then he replied that was a secret. He then became real serious and told me the page with the links was already gone. And he warned me not to tell anyone else, or I may end up starring in a third video." He then smiled and laughed. As he walked away, it dawned on me that he was the cameraman. I quickly thought, no, that is stupid. And he must have been just messing with me. At least, I hope he was.